This is Voices from the Edge with Bec and Phil Peace. Okay, so we are back again. This is episode 3. I'm back again with Bec. How are you doing?
Hi, Phil.
There we go. There's the excitement and the enthusiasm. You doing okay?
I'm doing okay, Phil.
Brilliant. Okay. It's really good to be back with you again. Do you want to introduce, firstly, what today is going to be about, and then who we've got joining us?
So today, what I wanted to talk about today was double binds in things like leadership for women, and particularly for women who are facing intersectional discrimination. And for us to talk about that, I've invited Shobha Ram.
Thank you.
Shobha and I have known each other for a lot of years now. So we knew each other, we worked together in a previous organisation. And then Shobha and I have come back together intermittently over the years, and we've had intermittent coaching relationship at certain points when you've reached out.
Mm-hmm.
And in that coaching relationship, I have learnt loads. Actually, I've learnt loads about your experience and the experience of women who are wanting to be in senior positions, who are from global majority Black and brown women, and kind of what then is experienced once women have found themselves in that position. And I have been grateful to you for sharing some of your experiences with me. So I've invited you on because I am really up for you sharing your experiences as much as you want to in this space.
Thank you. And we've come over for a couple of years together, and the coaching has really allowed me to really disrupt my own thinking of the spaces that I've been working in. And you don't really recognize that because you're in it every day. And what you allowed to do to me in my coaching was for me to pause and reflect. And that's been a real positive learning for me. And also the women that we have worked together with.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you, Shobha.
Okay, so from what you said then, so what are some of the challenges? Obviously, I will never have experienced anything that you're about to talk about. So I'm keen to sort of learn a bit more. I've changed a lot of things that I do based on my learning of how women are treated in general. Yeah. Like, I've never had to worry about walking through a park, for example. But I've not experienced any of this from a business sense. So what would you say is, like, if this was an elevator pitch, let's say you've got 30 seconds to tell me what life's like for a brown or black woman in business, what would the highlights be?
I think I can't answer that question, so I'm not going
to. Okay.
I think it's more than just the elevator pitch. That's the thing. I think what I've come to experience, and I know that other women of colour, in particular South Asian women in treatment services, because that's my background for 20 plus years, is fighting a space, not just as a woman, but of colour, and finding that voice that is landed in a way that you're listened to. So you're not, we talk about the sort of unconscious bias of being a woman anyway, and being emotional, being hysterical, or being aggressive or noisy, and all these other things that come with just women having a voice. And then a layer on top of that is the fact that you really stand up, because there really isn't that many brown women at the top in treatment services. So what are you doing there? Why aren't you the doctor? Aren't you the doctor? Are you the pharmacist? No, I'm not one of them. So it's really it's been a really interesting space for me to navigate. And it's not been an easy one. I've had to conform to the space because treatment services are predominantly white male, full white male. And so it's always pushing that actually there needs to be far more, which has made me kind of advocate for women's spaces in general in what I do.
So how do you fix that? Because I went to London to do some podcasts with some black males based on why we're not seeing young black males coming through into politics, and and it's because when they watch it, they don't see themselves, they don't see people like them. So how can you get more black and brown women involved in business if there isn't the people there for them to look up to? Like, which part has to be fixed first for where you start?
It has to be role modeling. If you look at some programs that are set up for black and Asian minority diverse communities to sort of step up or go into any sort of leadership, it's run by those role models, and therefore it is about role modeling. It is that we just don't see enough of it. And actually, it's for me to kind of break out of my mold and be in drug services, and I'll come on to my whole history and why I've landed in this space, is even to this day, at the top of my game, I guess, in regards to what I do now, my mother still refuses to acknowledge what I do.
Oh.
And that's because I've broken the mold of helping people with drug and alcohol issues. My mother would never understand it.
Okay, so then is the questions around heritage? Is it I can't think of the word.
Yeah, it's heritage. It's culture.
Culture is the word I was trying to think of. Yeah, it's
honor. It's all of these things. There's an expectation when you're from an Asian background. Is one, obviously the pressures of education, but it's also, I expect you to then be going into being a pharmacist or a lawyer or a doctor, and that still exists now. It's that pressure, especially in my generation. Was that pressure? And I didn't want to become any of those things, even though my mum sent me to a good school and all these other things. But no, I didn't want to. I wanted to do this. I wanted to help people. And it was seen as a lower class job. It's not seen as a profession. That's still a battle. And I think if you speak to some other amazing South Asian women in treatment services who are leading in spaces, they also struggle with that.
Right. So is that something that's going to get better generational, or do you think that's always going to be?
I still don't think it will be seen as a profession.
Right. Okay.
Because you are, the narrative would be, well, why you could go and be a doctor? Why would you want to be doing that?
Yeah.
So you're always going to have that struggle. I think by generation it may change. I think it would take time, though. It would take time for that to kind of be broken down.
Okay.
There are intersectional pressures, aren't there? Because you're talking about pressure from family, internal pressures, cultural pressures that are being passed on. At the same time, we are occupying systems that have been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So that the history of the systems that we're occupying, by which I mean work, in this context, we have what is embedded into the fabric of those systems are things like hierarchy. Things like hierarchy aren't particularly questioned. So a way of being within workspaces hasn't really had much disruption for hundreds, if not a couple of thousand years. And systems will always look for status quo. So our bodies are constantly looking for status quo. It's why we eat when we're hungry and put a jumper on when we're cold. And because the structures of things like work have really been formed by white men, there is racism and misogyny that is interwoven into the fabric of those systems, and in those systems looking for status quo will not want to be challenged in how they are operating.
Absolutely.
And I think that the intersecting pressures, therefore, are not only that brown and black women from global majority are in senior leadership positions. What the system does is kind of look to make sense of that. Doesn't particularly look to include, it looks to assimilate. And if the assimilation is not happening, if you are going in and are being culturally authentic, the system around you will really want to be pushing that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's been the case for me pretty much in every job I've been in, I would say, where you are seen as the indifferent individual, and therefore you have to conform to the white space.
Yeah.
And don't bring your culture, your spirit, or any of these things that are integral to us as humans, and your emotions. And we talked about it before, but around the kind of the linguistic discrimination. I don't talk like you do. I'm not going to fit in. English wasn't my first language. My mum didn't speak English. And therefore, I've had to kind of make sense of the world through my way. And so trying to conform in spaces and really, we talk about being your authentic self, and that's a struggle.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's quite a zeitgeist at the moment for being your authentic self at work. But actually, what that means will mean completely different thing for completely different people. And what is welcome into the workplace is not always authenticity, actually. So there is something about this kind of pretense of saying we need to bring ourselves to work, we need to show up as our true selves. And actually, the further you are away from the construct of normalcy, white middle class man, actually, the more difference you may bring into a space that is not actually necessarily welcome once it arrives.
Yep.
And I think that then what can happen is that because it can be confronting and different, and therefore leads people to feeling uncomfortable, what has to happen is that the location of the problem of my discomfort, I have to place somewhere else, and I'm going to place it in you because you're the one that has made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So what can happen on a systemic level is that if you are in a minority in that setting and you've got a number of people who might be in a majority who are all saying this is just too wild for us, it's too different.
Yeah.
I think that what can happen is that constructs then start to come in of things like professionalism.
Yeah.
So this is not professional, the way that you're dressing, the way that you're doing your hair, the way that you speak, the volume that you speak, that then what we can say is we don't have to lean into our own discomfort. What I can say is this is not professional. The way you look, the way you speak, the way you sound, and therefore I can locate full responsibility back into you, thereby giving you a choice that is either assimilate and be the same as everyone else, which can lead to exhaustion and burnout, or fight for your own place to be authentic, which can lead to exhaustion and burnout.
Absolutely. I think the kind of just go with it and just get burnt out was what I probably did in my very early days, because it was easier to do that and don't bring yourself in, just conform, just go along with it, don't recognize it. This is what you'll have to put up with. And as time has gone on, it's making a stand. It's it's recognizing that, no, I want to advocate for us women of color and the space that we're in. But that's a tricky one. You do get pushed out. You get singled out. You know, to what extent will you take that without being sort of ridiculed and, you know, finger points? You know, it's one that I've had to kind of be quite strong about, and it's been uncomfortable at times.
What was it that made you change that process of this is just how it needs to be to actually, I'm not okay with this? Was it a series of incidents? Was it just sort of one day? Like what made you change and think?
It was incidences, but also there was a couple of cases. I think looking back, it was also witnessing what happens as you go higher the ladder, especially for, I think, you know, I remember women in one organisation who were missing out on their children's birthdays, for example. It's like there was a really toxic culture of, no, we're not recognising that you're a woman, that you're a parent, that you are a mother, you just have to work. And I was just like, this is insane. What are you women doing? Why are you conform? All men leaders right at the top. And I remember getting pregnant at the time, and I said, I'm going to go and take 4.5 years off. And the look was, you're what? You're going to do what? It's like, I can see, you know, maybe some of my culture plays into that I want to invest in my child, whatever. I've got the opportunity. But I just watched you women who actually have a voice, you have a space, yet you can't even say that you're going to stop and you're not going to do a 60-hour week. You're actually going to just, you know, be there for your children. It was just such a really interesting space. And I was like, no, that was my first kind of like, no, I've got to see what women are doing, this space of, you know, the pressures of being in those sort of organisations on women, and going into other organisations where I'm quite a introvert. I'm really observant as a leader. I'm not massively outspoken. I'll speak when I probably need to say something. And I think that probably has I think as you go up and you're a leader in space, you could be seen as someone that probably doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, you're not outspoken or whatever. And so I felt like an underdog to someone who was really outspoken, but actually knew fuck all. And I remember them actually getting a position above me, which they knew nothing about, yet I was in that role already. Just as a white male.
Yeah.
And I kind of just stepped away, and then that individual came to me and said, "Oh, could you give me all your contacts and share everything that you know?" And I just went, "No, you can fuck off." and it's that kind of, well, actually, look, I know I kind of maneuver myself above you, and yeah, I know nothing, but I want to take everything off you. I think it just made me really quite internally angry. And I think I think, again, it goes back to that displaying as a woman of anger and emotions, and, how does that reflect on you in how high you up in an organisation? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable? How do you want people to remember you and think about you? And it's a space that you have to navigate every day. And I think also I have to navigate the fact that I am of colour and no one else in an organisation really is of colour. I've worked in organisations where there is no one else of colour.
See, I've been a manager in a few different roles and never had to think about how angry I can be or how friendly I can be. I've just been able to do the job, and if something happens that makes me angry, I'm angry. I've never had to consider the thing of how will this make me look, or how will I be perceived by showing these particular emotions. And I think when you're stuck in a system that is made by the people that the rules benefit, what's the what's the thing for them to then be like, oh, maybe we should change this because they're the ones that are benefiting from the way it's been set up. So it really needs somebody to break through. And I was thinking about when you were talking about culture and about the education side, to me, that would make you more employable because you've got the passion and the drive and you've got the family support in that sense. And all I kept thinking was, I'd want to employ that person over somebody who is quite happy to go on the dole or like have a job, not have a job, turn up, ring in sick, maybe not. But when it's sort of ingrained into you from being young, to me, that's a more employable skill, regardless of sort of gender and colour.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we've got an insane work ethic as Asians. There's no doubt about that. You know, we'll get up and do however many jobs that we need to do. That's unrecognised. We're loyal as fuck. I'll still turn up to work. I had to be forced to take time off when I was really unwell. My hospital said, no, you got 2 weeks, you've got to take off. And I was like, no, I'll still go to work. And they're like, no, you're not. But in my whole career, I've taken like 2 weeks off. Even despite all the shit that's thrown at me. Because my thing is, I'm not doing it for the people around me. I'm doing it for the people that I work for. That's where my loyalty lies, always. And I think, you know, it is troubling. I think, you know, treatment services in particular are troubled spaces, to be fair. The way in which they're set up, who they serve. We talk about being challenging stigma. No, you fucking don't. You stigmatise every day. You stigmatise about people that actually work in there for a start. You're not thinking about the lived experience these individuals bring. And actually, no, I don't need to talk about my lived experience to you, but you should be non-judgmental for the fact that I've gone through stuff. That's why I'm doing this. And I think that's, again, all of that plays into it. I've had situations where a white manager will say what's going on for her, maybe in her private life to other senior leaders. And it's, we're really compassionate about what's going on. And I'll be like, oh, well, this is going on for me as well. I want to share what's going on. Totally dismissed. Like, it's just such a fascinating thing to watch. So I'll be kind of like devil's advocate and just like lay it on really thick and just, you know, let's just see what comes of this. It's such an interesting space. And the last few sort of situations I've been in have been, you've stepped out of line. You've done more than your pay grade. Wow. One can't be passionate about their work or have aspirations or be ambitious. Oh, no, you can't. You can't. And therefore, you have to go.
Bec, have you experienced any of this just as a female, as a white female?
Oh, without doubt. Yeah. I mean, I think that I have had many years of speaking truth to power, being quite outspoken about the things that I don't think are right. I think I've been perceived as aggressive at times, overconfident. I recognise the keeping your lane. I recognise the over-ambitious, having to work so much harder. There been stuff around what you deserve, what you don't deserve, and I think the double bind of working to fulfill an aspiration or an ambition, and then that being seen as too much, stepping on my toes, that sort of thing. I mean, I think that my biggest thing, I think, my experience would be related to my voice. Both what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and how that is perceived. And I think that in some ways that got me to a certain place. and actually what I think, because of my willingness to use my voice, I think actually what did happen for me is people would tell me about their experiences because I could use that in how I was using my voice. So there is probably something about my learning of intersectional discrimination that was directly connected to how I have used my voice in the past. So I think because I have been witnessed speaking truth to power, then actually people who feel that they have got very little power have then come to me, shared experiences, and we have been learning together alongside each other, because people feel that there is a sense of trust.
Yes, very much so. You have given us from a white woman. You allow a safe conversation about what we're experiencing. You've got a fantastic way of seeing it, really listening to what we're experiencing, and helping us to kind of really understand how can we kind of get through this. That's what you've helped me and a number of other women that I've introduced you to and worked with. Absolutely. I don't think I would have got as far as I have without you, to be honest, Bec, because as generations of Black and Asian and brown people and women go through, we just conform. We're not told that we've got a voice to push against, because we'll go home and we sit in our narrative of we have to conform at home because we've got a caste, we've got a culture, we've got expectations, and then we just live out those expectations of what then work has. And so we're not asked to disrupt any of that. But, that's been a good space. Get fired next week.
You mentioned the words double bind in what you were saying earlier. What's that? What does that mean?
So double bind was a concept that Gregory Bateson came up with in the 1950s. What he talked about was when you are in communication with someone and there is no good outcome of anything that you say. So his example was, you never tell me that you love me. So there's nothing that you can say to satisfy. There's no good outcome. I do love you. Well, you would say that. You don't say, I love you. I told you so. So that was his example. And I think that it's been part of our conversations in those spaces where there is no good outcome of decisions that you're making. So I think that for women, and particularly women who are experiencing intersectional oppression and discrimination, there are endless double binds. So you were talking about earlier, there is something about silence and voice. So if I am a quiet leader, as you described yourself, then actually what may be happening is that what you're experiencing in relation to discrimination or misunderstanding or just not being considered, included, is that there is no education going on in a group, and there may be microaggressions or the institutionalized racism gets compounded. And it may get compounded because people are perceiving as Shobha as being conformist, for instance. If Shobha uses her voice to express how she's feeling, perceiving the world, shares, she's seen as different, difficult, not complying. And I think that in things like, you asked a question about how do you disrupt. I think that there is a real double bind in relation to education. So I think it's really easy to expect Shobha to hold the responsibility for educating her colleagues on what it's like to be a brown woman in leadership. That becomes exhausting. It's also an individual perspective. There is an expectation that Shobha represents the whole of her country, population, culture, and if Shobha doesn't take on that responsibility, then nobody learns. And I think even things like the concept of professionalism can hold double binds within them, of that there is very little inquiry as to who decided what it is to be professional. And we spoke about this with Amy before in Swim, of I think that when you're trying to create something that is disruptive and something other, there are a number of ripples as a result of that have to have some attention paid to them.
Yeah.
And I think that what I have found, and I think what you have found, that people reach their thresholds. That, can we talk about the construct of professionalism? What do you mean? I mean, it's obvious. We all know what it is to be professional.
Yeah.
But there isn't an inquiry as to, as you said, who is benefiting from that construct, who made the rules in the first place, who has to bear the burden of the cost of those rules, and therefore who's in and who's out when you are when the framing of professionalism is kind of is reinforced. And I think that there are other things you mentioned, things like assertiveness being perceived as aggression. No, I did a whole piece of work with a group of black women in the old organisation that I worked for on their real visceral somatic feeling of being stuck in the double bind of being perceived as angry. And there was almost this kind of self-perpetuating feedback loop of the more they were being accused of being angry, the angrier they became.
Right. Yeah, if you look at how Asian women speak, they speak really loud and passionately in their mother tongue. So that was only going to translate when I speak English.
Mm.
It's so fascinating. I'm sure black women feel the same. Mm-hmm. If you speak in your mother tongue, it's probably really, passionate. It's loud. It's, and so it's that translation and how it's then seen. And then you're talking about the pushing. You do meet a threshold. There's only so much where you can go before you go, why? What's the point? What's the point?
Yes.
And actually, it's who's benefiting then? Yeah. Because I'm not. I'm now tired. I'm exhausted. I'm questioning my own worth. I've lost my confidence. Right, I'm out. And then it goes back to that construct, and that organisation goes, well, okay, well, that person was the odd one out anyway, so good.
And it sort of reinforces what was there before it was challenged as well.
And I think there is something there about the reinforcement of the status quo, actually. And I think that the thing about reinforcements is they're often stronger than they were before.
Yeah. So
I think that there seems to be, I mean, I see how this lands with you. I think my sense of witnessing exactly what you've described is that the problem is located in you. There is rising frustration and either conformity, so I just have to mask and I have to pretend I am not who I am, or there is pushback and there is a growing confidence of actually I'm done with this, I am meeting my threshold. I think that the more the voice is heard, I think that the ripples can be a sense of fragility. So I think the discomfort that is felt can create a sense of fragility, and I think that actually fragility can also be a double bind, because once I feel uncomfortable, I'm shutting down. I can't hear anymore because actually I need to look after myself. So I'm going into a bit of survival. I need to get myself out of feeling so uncomfortable, and therefore, as we talked about before, it becomes incredibly convenient for me to say it's your fault and you are the problem, not me. So you get pushed out, my fragility dissipates, and I will do everything I possibly can to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Well,
So actually the generalization of your behaviors in race and gender means that I am much less likely. I may not do any of the inquiry and the learning to work out what happened, because I've already decided that it's you and it's your fault, your problem, and I'm not going to let that happen again.
yeah, that's exactly how it is. Exactly how it is.
I hate seeing these things where companies like, oh, we're culturally aware. Like, what does that mean? What have you done? How are you culturally aware? Have you employed one brown person to be, like you say, a spokesperson, or like what is that? What does that look like? And it's an easy answer to just say we just want the same treatment as everybody else. But I think even that in itself isn't right, because the same treatment as everyone else is different when you have different culture. Like I've experienced, so I'm Indian, my family are Indian. I've experienced racism from people that have felt okay to be racist in front of me, not knowing my history, my family, and I've had things where, like, I've worked for an organisation and they had a prayer room, and it's like, well, we don't get to have 5 minutes a few times a day to sit, and it's like, but that's not your culture. Why do you want those 5? And it's the same when people smoke. Well, if I don't get a smoke break, well, because you don't smoke. If you were Muslim and you prayed 3 times a day, then you would get 5 minutes, like, to, that's part of their culture. And it's just that understanding that a lot of it's jealousy, and it's like, well, I don't get that. But think about all the things you do get. This one tiny little thing that they've been given, and you're straight away, it's like, oh, well. So
that can I just pick up on that for a moment? Because I think that what is what is hidden, I think, and you and I discussed this a bit, it is white supremacy being interwoven into everything. So I think that the whole concept of white supremacy has got hooked into the far right and fascism. And actually, I think I can't help but believe that can be quite convenient, because we can other. We can say, that's not me, I'm not them, I don't believe like them, that's extreme and that's not me. And I think what that can do is it can divert attention from white supremacy being interwoven into every policy, every building, every how we speak, the language that we use, the dress that we wear. And I think there was something interesting that you're saying about difference. So I think that when difference is noticed, what you're not noticing is yourself in relationship to that difference. It is that you are believing that you are normal and that is different to me. I'm the normal one, that's different. So why don't I get that? Rather than thinking, that's interesting, that is part of their culture. What questions have I got to ask about that? And if questions are arising for me of I don't get that, what is happening for me with those arising questions? And I realised that the ask is to be reflective, to be able to sit in your own discomfort, to be able to kind of have some a depth of understanding of who you are in relationships to everything else and everyone around you. But I think that if we can acknowledge and work with the fragility that comes from that questioning, possibly from the discomfort of noticing difference, I think actually we might be having much more fruitful and richer conversations. And my sense at the moment is that I think there can be a shutting down of conversation by multiple people, actually. So if I'm accused of being racist, the accusation shuts the conversation down. So there may be complete justification for the accusation. What it doesn't do is help anybody learn about what might have happened to lead to the accusation. So I then feel shamed. I feel horrific, embarrassed. I want to withdraw, run away, and just feel absolutely horrendous. And actually, I don't particularly learn anything because I've shut down. I don't want to take any risks in having any sort of conversation because I don't want that shame to happen again. So actually, my learning is stopped from multiple places. And I think there is something there. I think that needs disruption. Because I have seen that the unintentional putting something out there, getting accused of being racism, and what happens in the space in between and in the relational, it just doesn't actually benefit anybody at all.
Yeah,
and. There is something about the disruption of how do we transcend the double bind of fragility so that we are inviting curiosity and inquiry, dialogue, conversation, discourse that involves everybody, that we are not locating the responsibility in one person who is the black woman in the room, but that we are all talking about our discomfort, what we're finding really difficult to talk about, stuff that we don't know. I think that
But I think that's the bit. There's times where the majority are white, but will struggle to want to educate and learn. And so if you've got the one individual out of that group that is interested in being curious about what you bring to the table, then you've got that ally. But one person alone out of 1,300, you're still having to conform. And I think that's the bit. I think there's that allyship bit and understanding that, having allies. What does that even mean? It's something that is not talked about in teams. It's not. It's so important though. It's really important.
But even that sounds a lot segregated because an ally is like somebody who sticks up for the underdog or for the outsider.
Yeah.
Even that to me feels like we're saying that you need people to be on your, but they shouldn't be your side. So it's still like I understand the sort of what it means, but for me but that helps me understand the position that you're in, because I don't.
Even in the allyship, I would say people will advocate if you're LGBTQ plus. When it's race, it's uncomfortable. It's really fascinating, and that's the experience I have had over.
It is difficult, and as a white person, even just knowing the language to use, the words that we say, I struggle sometimes, and even in like these conversations, I'll say things, and then as I'm talking after I've said it, all I'm thinking about is, did I say that right? How did that sound? Did that come across? And I'm constantly questioning my language because I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah, I mean, Bec asked me, how do you want me to, say who you are, and are you global majority? Are you brown or black woman? Well, what are you? That's such a personal thing. It's a personal thing. I'm happy with a brown woman. I'm happy to be just that. But global majority, no, I don't want to be lumped with people. I want to have a bit of a personality with what you're going to say about me. I want to be a brown woman.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating thing. It's a personal one.
And I think it's interesting what you're saying, because I think that the nervousness can mean that it's not brought into the room, which means that then
you don't bother.
You don't bother, and you don't learn, and and I think the nervousness is completely understandable because of what we were talking about earlier in terms of the call out, the how quick people can say you've got it wrong, how quick it can be to kind of point fingers, label blame, and I think that and going back to your point about the allyship, I mean, Emma Dabiri would talk about coalition, from allyship to coalition. Her phrase is, "Your shit is my shit," and I think that you're right in terms of, I think there is an inherent power dynamic in relation to allyship, and also, if you are the person that is in the minority who is the only one who is speaking, that feeling like you've got an ally in the room might be just the thing that you need in a moment in time.
Yeah.
And I think I got asked what I meant by sharing privilege. Like, how do you share your privilege? If you're holding privilege, how do you share it? And I think that for me, it isn't necessarily about being an ally. It is about speaking up when you see something is wrong. I am not doing it for you. I am doing it for all of us.
Yeah.
We all suffer harm. If one person is experiencing harm, we all are. And we are all in structures that have harm interwoven within them. So actually, we would be naive, I think, to think that it's all right for me. I am benefiting from this system, as you said earlier. I am rewarded from it. But actually, are you? If you are benefiting from a system that is inherently harmful, I question, really. And I think that. So I think that there is something about that the sharing of privilege is, we are sharing a burden, which some of us have to carry much more than others. We start to share the burden, it becomes a lighter burden, and actually it becomes about a collective way of being in relationship with each other, which is not necessarily about being the same. In fact, it's about allowance for difference, that it opens up. So there's plenty of space.
Yeah.
And I think in the plenty of space, that's where the space is for inquiry and curiosity that can be held with compassion. There is something about compassionate accountability.
Absolutely.
I think. And I think that is what possibly we can be working on to transcend the double bind of fragility. So given everything that I've talked about in terms of allyship, sharing of privilege, coalition, growing coalition, creating space for inquiry and curiosity, what do you think needs to happen in organisations to create the conditions for black and brown women and others to thrive, particularly in leadership?
My feeling would be that organisations listen and have compassion and space for women of colour to grow in those roles. We need space to exercise our voices and our ideas, and that without the constant barriers I think the amount of times I've been told, who gave you permission to do that?
Wow.
Yet I'm in the leadership role. Wow. I thought I had permission to do what I wanted, hence why I'm in the role in the first place. So it's that constant kind of, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Where that's where there's the pushback of, no, actually I want to. And I'm curious that if I did, what would then happen? So I think we need to kind of, there's a lot that needs doing. And I guess, that's why you may see that organisations that do thrive, that are set up, Black-led organisations or brown-led organisations really thrive with their own community. It's because they allow that space and they're forgiving.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's work to do. There's still a lot of work to do. But I think understanding the lens and the experiences and just how brilliant we are and what we can bring to any organisation is the acceptance.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a what would you advise is the process for people to go through as a reflective process? What questions would you say, ask yourself these questions?
On reflection, I think we talked about, being pushed, to what point would you continue putting yourself in a box to fit with the wider narrative of the organisation that you're sat in? Don't do it. You're going to burn yourself out, and actually it will take your creativity. It will just strip you bare of what you potentially could have a future with. So disrupt that.
So that's your advice to people of colour?
Yeah.
What's your advice to white people?
Welcome us, people of colour, into your organisation. Take time to learn and understand. Ask questions. Be curious. We're not like you.
Yeah.
So learn from it rather than think that we are going to step in and conform to your way of being, because that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it can't happen for so many reasons.
Yeah.
And continue some coaching with you, Bec. Which is, I really welcome that, and I say this, and I think, you're the first. I would say you've got such a fantastic lens of women of colour, Bec, as a white woman, because you bring in these conversations that are going on for us, but we haven't really figured out what is happening. And you allowed me to really kind of navigate that space. So yeah, it's been good.
And thanks for inviting me into it.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from you, and I always do. I always do my coaching, and I think that being in a coaching space with you, I think enables me to learn. And I think that there is something about me, I was thinking about this earlier, of there are points for me when I think I should have known that, and I think that is quite an unhelpful thought. And if I can catch it as I know that now, I need to listen to it. I need to listen to what I'm hearing, how I'm feeling in this moment, so that I can learn in this relationship. And I think if I can catch the feelings of, oh God, I should have known that can take me into a place where I'm not actually then connecting with you. And I think that what you've enabled me to do as a coach is express shock. So I think you make it really easy for me to be able to go, oh my God, I have no guilt about that.
Yeah.
And I think that actually there is something for me in my relationship with you and other women of colour that I almost feel a duty to express. When I'm feeling shock, I've actually allowed myself to express it, because there is something about that feedback loop of it is shocking, and it is shocking to me.
But you do it with such authenticity. You do it, which helps us to go, thank fuck you get it. And I don't have to be seen as someone that's about to be ridiculed or told to go and stand in a corner, or you're seen as too much. That's the safe space that you create for that feedback loop.